It is a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dino Watt, and he is a relationship expert. Let me read his bio. Since 2008, award-winning mentor Dino Watt, the relationship expert, has been helping high-income providers by replicating their business success into their personal relationships. His systems have been proven to create more happiness in marriages through peace in the workplace, more freedom for the many stress in life, and more revenue in your business. And the reason I called you, Dino, and I'm so glad you took me up on the offer to be a podcast interview, is dentistry is just a people business. And a normal, healthy human is hardwired for empathy and sympathy. And, I grew up with my dad, and he owned restaurants. And for 10 years, I worked with my dad from age 10 to 20. And people are so happy to come into a restaurant. They're going to eat cheeseburgers and onion rings. And I remember when I took my 4 boys to Disneyland. I seriously am not making this up. A kid was so excited, jumping up and down, he crapped his pants. And then we go into dentistry. And now we see the other end of people. And they come in, and they're scared, and they're hurt, and they're in pain, and they're grouchy, and they're not in a good mood. And then we're going to give them a shot and do a root canal and drain their bank account. And a lot of that, I notice when I'm working on a patient, after doing this 20 years, I know when they're stressed because I feel the tension start coming up in me. I used to feel my heartbeat going up, and I feel my chest. And so I talk me and the patient, and I go, okay, just relax. Come on, relax your hands.
Nice. You're talking to yourself, but you're talking to them.
Yeah. And the assistant, we're all going to feel this. I remember when we were little, people make fun of people who thought that there was such thing as like a sixth sense, like ESP. But after being a dentist for 20 years, I believe in ESP because if you're stressed out, you're stressing me out. And then dentists, have been tagged as having, that this carries on to their personal life, that they've had a high suicide rate, substance abuse problems. They say 18% of dentists during their career will be treated in-house for inpatient for substance abuse, about 80% of the time alcohol, about 15% of the time will be prescription narcotics like Vicodin and Percodan, and 5% for everything else. And then a lot of dental assistants over the years, she'll say, oh, I left my dental office, I'm in a real happy place. And I'd say, well, why'd you leave your dental office? The number one reason I've heard is, he's too moody and he throws instruments. And, the third time he threw an instrument, it hit me. My husband made me quit. And so it's just a crazy perfect storm of stress. I see dentists on Dental Town. They're 40 years old and they're talking about trying to retire before they're 50 or retire before they're 55. And here I am 53. I would start crying if I retired. If you told me I could never pull a set of wisdom teeth again, I really would. I'd probably just cry. So I wanted to get you on. I called you. You didn't call me. I've heard so many great things about you. I know you, relationship expert, you talk about marriage, workplace. So, I don't even know what questions to ask you. So what advice you're talking to several thousand dentists now, probably 80% of the United States, 20% in literally every country they measure on iTunes, get downloads on this show. What advice would you give these dentists in a high-stress job so that they don't throw instruments at their assistants, they don't go home and eat Vicodin, and don't beat up their wife, get divorced, or the very worst, take their own life?
Well, I got to tell you, first of all, I think, number one, it says a lot about you that you can feel that when that patient is in the chair, because when you stop feeling that is when I think you really need to be worried as a dentist, as a professional. When you are not showing that empathy and feeling that connection to every patient that gets into your chair, then there's a challenge. There's your biggest problem. But thank you for having me on this show. This is exciting for me too. And I would say the number one thing that I want people to really, really get is the most important relationship you can ever possibly have is with yourself. And dentists are doctors. Doctors are nurturers. Nurturers are healers. And just by their nature, they are givers. And most doctors that I run across have a really tough time receiving. And the problem is you can't give from an empty cup. So the more you give without feeding yourself, whatever that means for you, whether it be a hobby, whether it be the way that you give back, something that has nothing to do with dentistry, I don't know. But when you feed yourself, then you actually can be a better person. But I see these doctors who just drain and drain and drain and drain and work and work and work. And of course, it's going to show up in both their relationships inside the office with their team members and then also with their spouses. But yeah, that suicide thing. Matter of fact, I saw your video a while ago on the suicide and trust that you talk about. And that was really powerful because, number one, you taught some great examples in there about how to run your office. But two, to trust people, to be able to open up and talk to them. And I think we all in our society have this kind of, we're supposed to look good. We're supposed to not let other people know that we're having a challenge, whether it be in our marriage or in our practice. And we don't trust enough people to go out there and say, hey, man, I'm struggling. Like, this is not working out for me, and I don't know what to do. I've been doing this now for over a decade, and it is really, really shocking to see how many people are afraid because of the way it might make them look, or they think other people might look at them, to go out and get some help. So number one thing, most important thing, take care of you first.
I agree. And they also, like say they have 5 staff people. Say they got 2 front office, 2 inside desk. Those 5 will file out the door to go home. Zippy-doo-dah, zippy-day, my oh my, what a wonderful day. Yeah. And the dentist stays back puking up blood clots because he doesn't know how he's going to make payroll on Friday. And I'm like, why doesn't your team know this? Right. Why aren't you sharing this and letting everyone know so they can all help you with the books and the accounting and the collection policy and squeezing in a toothache?
And that's just it. If you've done your job right and built the team around you that you should, then they're going to be more than happy to help you. You just have to let them in on it. I call it one of 2 things. You either have to have a state of the business address where you need to come in at least once a quarter and say, hey, guys, this is where we are. This is what the numbers look like. And I find it fascinating. So many doctors that are afraid to tell their team what the numbers are, which they're guessing anyway, and some of them know anyway. But to let them know, this is what's going on, good and bad. And then the other thing is what I call the come to Jesus conversation, which is, look, things are not working well, or things are, we need to do something different. We got to change our attitude. We got to change this. I'm not working right. What can we do? And I think they'd be shocked. Well, I know they would be shocked because I've seen it over and over again that when they do reach out and say, this is what's going on, I'd love your assistance in it. People support what they create. So when you ask them to help you, then they're going to help you create stuff and they're going to support you more. But you got to be willing to do that. And I know there's going to be doctors, and because I've had this doctor say this to me, it's like, well, I don't trust my team. Like, I don't trust my team. What actually? They don't care. They're just there to – I was actually in an interview last week with a medical doctor here locally, and he was like, look, these people don't care. They come in, they're here passive. If something better comes along, they're going to go to that. And if their husband gets a job, they're going to go out and leave because they got to transfer with the job or whatever. And I said, man, don't you want a team that would rather not move because their husband got a job because they love the culture and the vision that you've created for them? That's the type of team you should create. You should create a team and should be able to create a team that wants for your good more than they want for the paycheck. And I know that kind of sounds Pollyanna-ish, but it happens. And there are people out there who will do that if you build the right team. And like you said, just tell them and they'll support you if you do what's right. So,
I read this a long time ago. Then I read it about 5 years ago. And then I've asked a lot of people this. When I'm sitting in a situation, I'll go around the table and I'll say, okay, tell me what you like, what's most important about a job. And it seems like all the men start with money. And all the women start with, I like the people I work with. I feel good about what I'm doing. I like my job. And money's like 3, 4, 5, or 6.
Yep.
And boys are, same thing with an associateship. They'll come out of school, and if one doctor has, been married 5 times, no staff stayed there longer than 2 years, none of his patients come back, but he pays more money, they'll go to hell for a little more money instead of going to work for some nice guy. He's been married for 40 years. He's got staff that have been in there 25 years, and he's got this big recall practice because everybody wants to come back. And I'm like, man, you paid all that money to go to dental school. Why don't you take a pay cut and go learn from a mentor where you'll learn about people and business and management? But they just service that almighty buck, whoever,
Well, it's like you said about going to dental school, right? Nobody teaches them this stuff, though. I mean, that's what I really had to come to terms with when I first started. When I first started my business, it was all only mentoring people on their marriages that were doctors, orthodontists, chiropractors. And I slowly started to realize, mostly because they kept saying this, that in their practice, it's the same problems, the same communication problems, it's the same business problems that they didn't understand. And I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I mean, ever since I was 21 years old, I've been an entrepreneur. And so to be able to put those skills into place, what I started to recognize is these guys don't have a clue, not just business-wise, right? Not just how to crunch the numbers, but when it comes to personal relationships, which is what business is all about, they don't know. No one taught them. I call them propreneurs. You know, you got a professional degree and you're shoved out to be an entrepreneur and nobody taught you anything. So these propreneurs are out there in the world and they are struggling and frustrated. And what they're doing too is they're learning what they know from the other guy who was there before them, who they either bought the practice from or was hopefully their mentor in some way. But that guy also tried to figure it out on his own. I mean, there's not enough resources that are as good as like a Dental Town type resource that teaches them this type of stuff. And I think the biggest disservice, I just spoke last Sunday to the American Student Dental Association, District 10 up there. And I said, I told him, I said, I come to you from the future. You know, you guys are first, second, third year students. I'm not a doctor. I just deal with doctors on a daily basis, from guys who've been in the business 25 years to 5 years. And the biggest disservice I can tell you that you are that is happening to you right now while you're in school is no one is teaching you this stuff. No one's teaching you how to deal with relationships. No one's teaching you to have like a really specific vision of what you want and what you should want in life, so that you're going for the right job as opposed to going for the wrong job and 5 years later, 10 years later, being totally burned out because you went for the wrong thing because you didn't know how to think through that process. So it's very, very interesting. And that's why I love doing this, is because it's kind of an aha for so many people. Like, oh yeah, I should think that way. Oh yeah, I can have a business the way that I want it. I can create these relationships within my office that support me even when things are bad.
Well, you know, it's called natural selection. I mean, you know, they always wondered why Europe had a 0.5% bipolar rate and America had a 4% bipolar rate, and it took them 50 years to figure out that who was the most likely person to leave Europe and just say, forget this country and throw everything down and get in a boat and sail to America. It was someone on a hypomanic edge. And so 500 years of immigration, America, in fact, there's a book on it called The Hypomanic Edge, how a little bit of craziness leads to a lot of success. And we basically drained Europe of all their manic bipolars. And then dental school takes it even a step further, because if you are well-rounded in college and make A's, B's, a C or two, and join a frat and have a girlfriend and have a nice life, you're never going to get accepted to medical school, dental school, or law school. But if you sit there and live in a library for 3 years and no frat, no fun, no girlfriend, no nothing, and just hammer down like I did, I got in a year early. And so who shows up to the freshman year of dental school? A bunch of freaks who'd never had a girlfriend, who basically, you know, memorize calculus, physics, geometry, chemistry, and just so the dental schools, I mean, it's them accepting all the people who are just like scientist freaks. And then they get out and they realize that all the calculus and physics and geometry you memorize, you'll never use a single time in your entire career. And now you got to explain to Mrs. Wimpleton what a root canal is, and she's mad that Obamacare doesn't pay for it. And it's like, well, why would your boss and your president need to pay for the fact that you don't brush or floss or take care of your teeth? In fact, you carried a Mountain Dew into the operatory, you know. So it's tough. So they get frustrated, and then they're perfectionists.
Right.
I mean, they'll sit there and do a filling in some pig's mouth who hasn't flossed in a decade and brought a Pepsi to the dental appointment, and it's just slightly wrong. So then they'll redo the whole thing, and then they're running the whole schedule an hour late because they always have to do A+ dentistry in mouths who don't care.
Yep. And it's going to be ruined the moment they walk out the door. And yeah, I totally agree. You're so right. This perfectionist idea, this hyper perfectionist in a way. And I said this at my speech last week. I say this a lot, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but there is a certain point to where your God complex, which a lot of doctors have, gets in your own dang way. And it's because you're not willing to say, hey, I need help, or that's good enough for what it is. Like you said, when the client is not performing in the way that you would want them to perform, and you're superseding anything possible that they can ever achieve, you're even setting them up for failure, let alone setting yourself up for failure and frustration.
And plus, people are so complex. I mean, it seems like every single person that's ever got mad at me for being involved with fluoridating the water in Phoenix. I mean, literally have come to my office and chewed me out, or have a pack of cigarettes in their pocket. And like, really? Really? The Marlboro doesn't bother you? It's us putting fluoride in the water.
Right.
Well, what you started off in marriage advising. What marriage advice you get? There's a lot of people listening. In fact, I know a lot of these podcast fans are husband and wife. 30% of the girls in the dental school married a boy in their class.
Sure.
So there's just tons of couples right now listening to you driving to work. Most all my feedback on these podcasts is commute to work. So right now you're probably talking to at least 100 man and wife couples. They're both a dentist. They're driving to work. Give us some marriage advice. My advice, I've been recently divorced 6 years ago. My advice is just don't do it. But
well, marriage is the number one cause of divorce.
So give us some marriage advice, and then give us some tools of how we could deal better with our staff and our patients.
Well, they're probably almost one and the same. So the idea that I always look at is two of the most common challenges in marriages are communication and money. Those are the two number one stated cause of divorce in the world is money, and number one stated challenge that couples have whenever I ask anybody is, we just don't communicate right. We're not on the same page. And one of the most fascinating things is that when I really do talk with couples and I find out what their biggest challenge is when it comes to communication, I find out that it really isn't communication. It's perspective of that communication. The couple, let's just say a young lady marries a guy and but when they're marrying, when they're getting to know each other, he's funny and he's spontaneous and she loves that about him because she's really not that funny and spontaneous and her life's kind of been structured a certain way. And so she just is really attracted to that. Cut to 10 years, 20 years later, that same guy now in her mind has become sarcastic and not spontaneous. What's the opposite of spontaneous? Sorry, I just went blank. Sarcastic and kind of unreliable. And so this becomes the exact same thing, just looked at in a different perspective because of 20 years of my opinion or 20 years of what I think I should have had or whatever. And so that perspective is something that they have to kind of get a grasp on, that they're able to look at somebody and say, well, I used to love that they were so organized. Now they're just anal retentive. Well, no, they're actually still the same person. They just you're looking at it differently. And we all do this. If you look at the research from the University of Washington, Dr. John Gottman, I mean, he has some amazing research, and he shows there that basically 60% of the challenges that any couple has in their marriage will never go away. They're perpetual problems. They're just not going to change. 30% of it is what you can change. So for me, I look at that going as a statistics, looking at statistics going, wow, then I only have to focus on the 30% of the challenges my wife and I have. Most people focus on the 60 that they can't do anything about. The number one tool that I tell couples is to have what I call a marriage mastermind, where it's a once a week, if at the worst, once every 2 weeks, sit down. And it's a time where we get together and we talk about what's actually happening, black and white. It's not a complaint session. It's a, hey, how are we doing? What do we need to focus on? What are the challenges that we're having? And even simple basic things like what's our calendar? Like what's going on this month? What's going on next month? What's going on with the kids? And it's much more involved, but that's my staple. Like I tell couples all the time, and in my opinion, it is, because my company for the marriage side of it is called the Business of Marriage. And I did that because I looked at businesses that were very successful and saw all the systems they have in place, and they can actually almost predict the outcome that they're going to have because of the system. Well, why don't we do that in marriage? Let's have a system for all these different areas. Well, the employee review. A lot of companies don't do employee reviews every quarter, which I am a firm believer in. You do an employee review every quarter. You get to know what's going on in these people's heads. You let them know that you care about them. I would do the same thing in your marriage. So those two things in your relationships, in your home and in your business will totally transform the communication that you have with one another. Number one, because the other person knows you care. And there are three things everybody in the world cares most about: that you hear me, that you see me, and what I say matters. If people know that you believe that, if people know that you see them, you hear them, and what they're saying matters to you, it transforms communication overnight. So those two things, having the marriage mastermind and having in your marriage, and then having a employee review every quarter, are going to transform the communication.
So I see, a lot of times the staff they're afraid of the dentist. Like dentists I've lectured all over, and dental assistants will come up to me and say, "Will you talk today about impression technique?" And I'll say, "Well, what's your biggest problem?" And she says, "Well, when the impression's better, she'll say, the lab man is afraid to tell the dentist the impression's bad because he doesn't want to lose the account because a Crown and Bridge lab has like 10 guys giving them $5,000 a month in dentistry, so they don't want the dentist to say, well, screw you, I'll find someone else." The assistant's afraid of losing her job. I mean, so I call it the Saddam Hussein syndrome, where if everybody that was around Saddam Hussein, if he said, can I attack Kuwait and keep America out? If you said, well, no, they'll slaughter us, you were killed.
Right.
So you just surrounded by yes men.
Yeah.
And I don't see safety. And very few offices, like I can tell my assistant Jan something, and she can argue with me for 20 minutes and all that, and because she knows she's safe. But most assistants and most lab techs, most supply reps, a lot of supply reps are listening to this that drive around selling supplies with Ben Cohen, Patterson, and Henry Schein, and they just can't go up to you and say, Dino, you're the only guy in South Jordan, Utah that does this, and if you would just try this, or because you're just going to fire her, and
right.
She doesn't want fired. So how tell these dentists, that doctor complex, say, I'm a doctor and you're not, and we're doing it blue, and I don't want to hear nothing else. Talk to these guys. How can they be more? How can they just relax and?
Well, here's the thing. I think that a part of that is an ego issue. Like obviously they don't want to look bad. Nobody wants to look bad, but especially hey, your name's over the door, right? This is your building. It's all on you. So there's a challenge of that. The challenge that how you can overcome that challenge is really knowing who you are and your core values and what you've set up as rules inside your office. I always say that in order for a culture to be created, you have to have a vision, expectations, and support. The expectations part of it is really being able to say, not core values like, oh, we have an integrity. Well, I would hope you have integrity. Or, we give great customer service. Yeah, I'd hope so. No, like, what's your core value? What do you mean? Like, we believe in our office, we believe in radical transparency. We believe in open and honest communication. We believe in only having good days and great days. When you have those core values, and as the leader of the office, which is really hard for a lot of doctors to fully be a true leader, as the leader of the office, then they are the ones who have to be first in line for all of those. So if somebody's coming to them from a place of, hey, doc, I don't think that this is correct, or you shouldn't be doing this, or whatever, and they're doing it from a place of genuine concern and genuine radical transparency, for example, if that's one of your core values, then you have to be willing to take that in and know that it's not an attack. There's a great saying, and I'm sure many people on this call have heard it before, but it's, nothing has meaning but the meaning you give it. Well,
I've never even heard that.
You've never heard that?
Nothing has meaning but the meaning you give it?
Yeah. I mean, isn't that, when you think about that, it's truth, right? No matter what somebody says about you or to you, it doesn't mean anything unless you give it the meaning. So you messed up on a crown, and a patient comes in yelling at you, you're a sucky doctor, whatever. You can take that in as truth and have put meaning around, like, wow, maybe I'm a kind of sucky doctor. Well, maybe I did things wrong. Maybe I didn't do this. As opposed to saying, hey, the fact is something happened. Something happened with the crown. It went bad. Okay, I'm going to fix that thing. Somebody was mad at you. An accident happened. Something bad in your family happened. You put meaning on this. We all are meaning-making machines, and so we put that meaning out there as opposed to just saying, what actually happened? This person gave me feedback. This assistant said, hey, doctor, I think we should do this instead. They gave me feedback. I'm going to take that in as a professional, not personal, as a professional, and go, what does she mean by that? Maybe I overlooked something. She's not saying I'm a bad person. She's not saying I'm not a good doctor. She's just saying She's actually doing it actually to help me out. Okay, good feedback. Because everything's feedback, right? Everything's feedback. So when somebody complains to you, when somebody is upset with you, it's just feedback. It doesn't mean anything unless you say it means something.
That is very, very interesting. So in your so you agree that if you can't keep your spouse and you can't keep your staff, that you can't keep your patients? Would you agree with that? I mean, if you have high spouse turnover, that is related to high employee turnover.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad I've never really heard it said that way, but that's absolutely true. Because what I always say is when I'm talking to couples, is I'll just say, so and a lot of times I'm dealing with doctors, male doctors, and then their female wives, obviously. And so I'll say to the wife, I'll say, hey, what do you think about his team? Like, do you think he has this problem with his team as well, this type of communication? Oh, yeah. And, she sees it. And, of course, she has her opinion on it. But when I go into the office and I'll interview the people in the office and I'll ask questions, not directly like, so is your doctor doing this and this and this? I'll ask questions that help me understand how they feel about the doctor. But I always see a mirror. Look, if you can't communicate well in your marriage with your spouse, then you're probably having challenges inside your office too. If you're a dictator dominator in your home, you're probably going to be a dictator dominator in the office and vice versa. Or it's the exact opposite. Because of the stress and frustration, sometimes I see doctors who are completely weak and intimidated and really, really, really what I call beta, the beta side of things at home. And then to get it out of them, they become alpha, over-dominated in the office, over-domineering in the office. So it's really an interesting play, but I think in almost everything. I mean, I can point out business stuff where I go, I bet you're not a really good marketer. I bet you're not. I do. My wife and I are body language experts, and matter of fact, when I speak sometimes and I go to office, I do a communication program where it's all about body language, and I will go into doctors, and I'll be especially study groups. I love this. I can walk around and I can see the doctors, especially when they're talking to other female doctors or any other women in the room, or they start talking about women, and I can tell who have emasculation problems, who are being challenged at work.
Who are being what at work?
Challenged at work. And
what is an emasculation problem when the other sex makes you feel weaker?
Right, when they're being dominated basically by the other sex. So
I see this a lot where the woman dentist makes, the big bucks.
Yep.
And her husband makes just a little money. And they'll come up to me and they'll say, the fact that my wife makes so much money, it makes me feel emasculated.
Absolutely.
I always tell them, I said, well, just try not to think of that while you're vacuuming.
Which just makes them feel so much better.
Am I being a good counselor? Should I get out of dentistry and start counseling?
Hey, you're being straightforward. You're being straightforward. No, yeah, it's interesting to see that. We see it a lot. Definitely. It's look, I believe you can have a mixture of the alpha and the beta. I think there's a very important blend between those that you need to have. But a lot of times, matter of fact, I was talking to Dr. Clark Sanders out of, I think, Ohio. Anyways, great dentist, general dentistry. And he and I were talking, and we were talking about this idea. And they had, and I'm probably going to mess up the story, but the base gist of the story you'll get. They had breeder dogs in their backyard. And they're, I think, 3 female dogs. Well, one of their male dogs, that was an indoor dog, the companion had died or whatever. So they put, or maybe they put that dog, who was the breeder dog, in the backyard with these 3 other female dogs. And within like 2 months, all of a sudden, the dog wasn't able to produce any babies. Like he wasn't able to get any of the other dogs that they brought over to breed pregnant. So he took it to the vet, and they're trying to figure it out. And the vet asked him, he said, so where does this dog live, basically? And he said, he's in the backyard. He's never been back there before, but over about 6 months ago, we put him in the backyard with 3 other female dogs. And the doctor said, yeah, his sperm count has dropped dramatically ever since he's been in the back with those 3 female dogs. And he was just talking about how interesting the nature of it is of, when you do get around that. And by the way, this is no slam on having women in your office, because I know that's the way it is. It's a matter of understanding how to have a conversation with them, how to communicate with them, and how to be the leader. And I've seen women doctors, female doctors, who also become emasculated by the other women around them because they try to control. Like I always say that your culture, if you aren't deliberate about creating a culture in your office, it's going to be a default culture, typically run by the strongest personality in the office. And a lot of times these doctors get totally emasculated by the women in the office, female or male doctor, it doesn't matter, but they get emasculated and that drops their power. And so they do things like the crying game for, I had a lady call me. She wasn't even a client of mine. She was a financial coordinator in a dentist's office, and she needed some help with some situation she was dealing with because she had heard about me. And she said, I started talking to her a little bit more about it, and he said that her doctor actually offered her the office manager job in their office, and she turned it down. And I said, why? And she said, because I had to tell him that we all know that in order to get our way in the office, all we have to do is start crying, and he'll give it to us. And I can't be put in a position to where I'm going to hand out maybe a disciplinary action or something to somebody, and that person's going to go to the doctor and cry, and him reverse my decision. I can't live in that world. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting, and not something, it's not new, but when she will be willing to admit that, yeah, we just have to cry, and we'll get our way because he doesn't want to have to deal with it.
I also have seen this a lot, where you go into an office and there's been massive staff turnover. I mean, nobody has stayed 3 years for the last 15 years, but one person. And that's the one person who doctor just thinks he can't live without, and she's the best person ever, and she's crazy, batshit crazy. And her best everything is when she's talking to the doctor and she gets him a Starbucks on the way to work and she fawns all over him. And then when he's in there doing a root canal, she's just crazy. What red flags have you seen in marriages, or you're talking about a bunch of
office
people.
Of marriage, the marriage office.
Yeah, well, as far as marriage, dealing with your staff, dealing with people in general, what red flags do you see? Because I believe a lot of the dentists don't know that they're nuts, and I also think older people, you learn your own tool. I mean, I think I'm a much better person than I was 5 years ago, and 5 years ago a better person than 10 years ago.
Sure.
I just think I just keep learning and getting better. A diet of self-improvement for 53 years, but to give some red flags to these dentists that might make them realize, yeah, maybe I am like that, because they're just sitting in the car saying, I'm my shit don't stink.
Well, they might be saying that, but if they're also sitting in that car going, why is it like I'm repeating the same thing over and over again? That's a number one thing I get from doctors all the time. I feel like I teach them something, I tell them something, and 6 weeks later I'm teaching the exact same thing again, or I'm asking for the exact same thing. That's a big red flag for me. That means that they don't take what you're asking them seriously. Now, that can be a leadership issue, obviously, but it also can be they know how to play you, because if it just goes back to the same way after you've tried to implement something and they have that ability to kind of overpower you, that's a big challenge. I cannot agree with you more. I wanted to say about that I see both sides. The people that are always on turnover, or the people have been there forever, and they've just kind of trained the doctor on how they want things to run. So the doctor just like, well, I don't want to, ruffle any feathers, and I don't want to put any ripples in the water, so I won't do anything. That's number one is when you realize that the things that you're asking to be done, you're repeating over and over and over again. I also want them to check in and see how often are they conceding. Like, they want something, they ask for something, but then the other person, the team member, is consistently asking for a concession. Oh, okay, I'll do that, but can I have this instead? I had one doctor who every time they took a vacation, which was a normal scheduled vacation for everybody, he had a treatment coordinator who her husband was a pilot, and so she got free airline tickets. Well, in order to make sure she didn't waste any of her time in the airport, not catching the I want to say flyby, but she gets the seat for free.
Standby.
I don't know why I call it flyby. She always asked for a day off, one day before and one day after, because if she has to wait in the airport for a whole day, either on either side of the vacation, then that'd be one day of her vacation that she wouldn't get. And so she'd have to be able to have that extra day just in case, so she could have vacation the same as everybody else in the office. And this became a habit that after 10 years is when I first came into the office and I was doing a little bit of consulting and looking at him, and I just kind of had this conversation with him. I was like, why is that okay? Like, why do you do that? He goes, well, it's just something, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, and it's just something she does. It does bug me. It drives me crazy, but, it's just a habit we've created. When you are making concessions on a consistent basis for people, oh, my kid's sick. Oh, I can't make it in that morning. Oh, I really don't want to work Fridays, whatever. When you're doing that for them as opposed to for the highest and best use of your time and your practice use, that's a challenge. So look out for that and be honest with yourself. I know they're a good person. I know that they are wonderful and they have 20 kids and a husband that they've got to support because he's been laid off. There are so many stories out there as a reason why you want to get the concession. But look at how it actually makes you feel and how it affects the entire office, because it is a ripple effect. Everything you do, when you give this one person a concession over here to not do her job fully and not be expected to do everything else everybody else is expected to do, then you cause a challenge with somebody else because that other person sees it. It's the great book, Good to Great, right? In the book Good to Great, he talks about how you have great workers. You have one, I'll call him low-level worker. That low-level worker is going to affect your best workers. The longer you keep that one low-level worker with you, the worse it is for your entire company, even if they're a really good person. And everybody I just think is a good person. So it's kind of a level playing field. It drives me crazy when I hear doctors be like, but they're really good people. I know. I'm not saying they're bad people. They just might not be a fit for you. Love them enough to let them go find a place that fits better for them.
And I'm going to say something that sounds completely insane, but there is good in everyone. I mean, growing up, how many interviews did we hear of Charles Manson being interviewed or whatever?
Yeah, right.
And he seemed like just kind of an adorable, jolly, kind of silly nuthead. And
Hitler had friends.
Yeah, exactly. And I would listen to Charles Manson. I'm like, well, he needs to be in a cage, and he's completely insane, but he is kind of adorable. I mean, and some of the stuff he says is cute. I mean, and the reason I'm making that point is because you're right. A lot of dentists have a hard time pulling the plug and letting Mary go because he thinks, well, she goes to the same church. She's got a good husband. She's got good kids. There's so many great things about Mary. And we're like, yeah, but we're talking about she's your dental assistant, True or false? I've always thought that the most disruptive person in the office is the person that has highs and lows. I mean, they come in one day, oh, Dino, how are you doing? And like 4 days, they're great. And then the 5th day, they flip way to the other side, and they say mean things. Moody people. Do you think moody people is the worst toxic thing in the office?
Yeah, I think it definitely can be. I think it's one of the, when you don't know what you're going to get on a daily basis, it's got to be so kind of, look, you're a doctor, you're dealing with enough stuff, right? You got enough stuff on your brain. And if you're having challenges with, receivables or whatever it is, or just this, you have a lot of clients that day, the last thing you need to worry about is the time bomb that might go off at 8 o'clock when she walks in the door.
Right. God.
And the challenge is that the secondary challenge is that you are too afraid to pull the plug, because what if you can't fill that spot? Look, I hear it all the time. I don't know, man. It's tough to hire somebody that's good, or it's tougher to hire somebody that I want. Well, geez, you're really going to keep this energy suck around you on a daily basis because you're afraid that somebody else can't fill that void? I promise you they can. As soon as you open up that void, they will. But yeah, those time bombs, man, it's listen, if anything, if whatever anybody gets out of this interview, I'm going to tell you this. If you don't think it's not affecting your clientele, that they don't see it and they don't recognize what's going on in the office, you're fooling yourself. Because the people who walk into the office who don't know, see, when I come into an office, I come in as a patient. I never come in as a consultant. I want to come in as a patient because I want to see how I'm treated and how the office feels. And is this just another run-of-the-mill dental office, or is this something different? Does it make me feel better? And when you're having a bad day, or when Sally's having a really bad day, or when there's tension, Just like you said at the very beginning of the show about you being able to feel the nervousness of that patient and you being able to feed off of that and feel that and have yourself calm down, so does the patient. So does the patient's mom and dad. They feel that too. And if there's an uncomfort level, their fight or flight feeling inside of them has to say, I don't want to come back here. So those patients who always miss the 6-month checkup, those patients who never want to come in and see you, not because, going to the dentist is the greatest thing in the world, but there might be an underlying reason there of they can feel the uncomfortableness, the not niceness of this place to be. People will spend thousands of dollars a day going to Disneyland because, and all this money that nobody has, right? Nobody has money. I don't have money for dental care or health care or anything like that. But they have thousands of dollars they can spend for a family of 5 to go to Disneyland because of how it makes them feel. Because when dad walks through the gates, he also gets to be an 8-year-old kid and play around through the eyes of his kid. If you're not making them feel that way when they walk in, there's going to be a challenge there. And if you're making them feel the exact opposite, you can bet that's going to affect how often they want to visit you.
And I also think the problem with the moody ones is, what I always like to see is every time I run into this employee or patient or friend, it's the same person that shows up. But the ones that are, moody, the problem is, when sometimes they're not just average, they're better than good. They're just really good, but they're gonna trend back towards the mean average by one of those times they're gonna be really bad. And I think that unstable. I think the unstable moody person is the toughest thing. So you do think that building strong relationship is the most important thing you can do to build your business?
Well, let's think about it this way. The short answer is yes. But if you look at your life, if anybody's listening, just think about your entire life and everything you've ever received, everything you've gotten, whether it be tangible or intangible, relationships, things, office, work, everything you've ever received has come through some sort of relationship. Anything you ever want in life going forward will come through a relationship. So we work on how to collect more. We work on how to present cases better. We work on how to even have a better, environment. What colors should we paint the office? But really, the most important thing you can work on is how do I have a better relationship with myself, with my team, and then with my clients? And I think that permeates through everything. The relationship you have with your clients starts in your marketing because the first time they see you, what does it look like? How does it make them feel? When they go up to your website, what's the relationship you're building there? Everything's about relationships. I can thread just about anything through your relationships and the culture in your office, whether how good it's going. To answer even in a more direct way, as an example, I was on a call with one of my clients yesterday he's been working with me for about 18 months. And last January, I challenged them. He's an orthodontist, actually. But I challenged them how many starts they wanted to have in this month. And they had only done 35 starts in a month before, and we pushed them, and he wanted to do 40. So they decided on 40. And on the last day of the month of January last year, they hit 40, which was huge for them. They were so excited, right?
It's huge for anyone.
Right. It was gigantic. They loved it. They hit that goal. They were so excited to do it. Everybody pulled together. Everybody was on board. Then this year, they went, okay, we're going to push ourselves a little more. And I didn't know about this until we got on a call with them yesterday. He said, we're going to push ourselves a little bit more. And they decided for 41 for this year, right? He goes, Dino, as of yesterday, we're at 39 already. And what has been the difference has been in the last 18 months, they have really focused on how they feel about each other. He knows all of his employees' whys, what drives them, what's their biggest motivators in life. They know clearly what their vision is for the entire office. They know what the core values are, and those core values are their hiring and firing list. Like he's right now down a team member, and he's trying to find one, and they've been looking for one for about 6 months, and he goes, we've interviewed a ton of people, really nice people, but when we think about our culture and who we are bringing into our space and who we're allowing to work with us and be a part of this, we just haven't found them yet. And they're willing to wait, even though it's hard, even though it's putting a lot more pressure on everybody else because they got to pick up some slack here and there. But because of that relationship, they are doing better in their in their client retention. And then he says, Dino, I don't know what's going on, but over the last probably 3 months, we've had daily 7 to 10 new patient phone calls coming in. I haven't done anything different with my advertising, anything different with my marketing, nothing. As a matter of fact, I've lost one of the referring dentists. I don't know what's going on. And I said, well, I do. I told you at the very beginning of this journey that when you know who you are and you create a culture, it'll be a magnet to people who want to know more about you. People will spread the word. Oh, I love going to Dr. D's office. I love that there. And they will share more about you, and it will bring more clients into you. So I always show, because, look, I know we live in both a physical world and a energetic world. I want to show energetically we can change things, the feeling and everything in the office, but I always want to show how that energy translates into hard numbers, that there will actually be an increase in the performance of your people that work with you and the people who come to you, so you're going to make more money.
I want to ask you a very challenging question that a lot of dentists have. You want to be nice to people. You want to hear their stories. If they want to tell you about, their dog died, cat died, you want to be their friend. But then again, you got to be a leader. The question is, how do you draw the line between, Dino, you work for me, you're a great assistant, I want to be your friend, but where do I stand back to be a leader? Because I always find it bizarre how when Americans talk about, the greatest leaders of all time, they always talk about generals like Eisenhower and Patton and MacArthur. And, these guys didn't blink at D-Day. 29,000 people died on, what was the day of that? 68 years ago. It was, here.
I'm not going to be able to help you on that.
June 6, 1944. I mean, I would have a hard time throwing that many lives away to achieve my objective. These guys didn't blink. I mean, I could almost see how you could argue that maybe they didn't have empathy. Maybe they didn't have sympathy. I mean, Patton was this great general, but he just didn't care about war casualties. I mean, he wanted victory. And if that meant 29,000 people die on my battle plan the first day, they don't blink. So how do you draw the line between, I want to be open. If the staff, you go in the break room, sometimes they want to tell you about their husband or this or that and all their friends. But I can't get too close, because at the end of the day, I can fire you. And I can affect your life by giving you a raise or not giving you a raise or firing. So what are some guidelines? I'm having a hard time asking this because I'm a man, but I believe from a lot of dental consultants I talk to that women dentists have a lot harder times managing women staff. And one of the reasons is because after work, they go get mani-pedis with them. They go to happy hour. They go eat cheese balls and have beers. And then Monday morning, she's going to say, yeah, you come in 5 minutes late. One more time, I'm going to fire you. And that other girl might be thinking, dude, I'm 5 minutes late because we went to happy hour last night and I drink too much. And so will you just talk about what's too friendly with staff and what's too standoffish?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Howard, because you've got to know your boundaries as an owner. I was actually just thinking about this today as I was driving, the difference between being a business owner and a company owner. And this isn't completely worked out in my head, so forgive me, but my thought was, business owners are people who, really anybody can open up a business, right? It's like, okay, cool, I have a business, I have a widget that I sell, this is the thing I do, and I make money off of that. But are you a company owner? Are you somebody who wants to see this company of yours grow? If so, you've got to take a different leadership position. It is great to be friendly. People talk about how different leaders, you can talk about Walt Disney, you can talk about Steve Jobs, you can talk about Bill Gates, and all these people, they're involved in people's lives, but there is that distance. And I think it's important to set those parameters up. I don't believe, unless they're your, and I say this to a lot of my clients, unless they're your office manager, I don't believe you should be texting back and forth with your anybody in your office. I don't think you should be Facebook friends with people in your office. Number one, because I think it gives you a sense of freedom to not feel like you can't post something that you want to post. But number two, do you really want to see somebody in your office, her drunk selfie on Saturday night because she was out partying with her friends and have that image in your head. Like, you really don't. I think you need to set up boundaries in your life with both your team, and I'll bring it right back to the marriage stuff. In our marriage stuff, we talk about what are the boundaries you're going to have with friends? What are the hours you're going to spend with them, right? What are you going to be willing to do and not to do? I have a friend who will not ride, he's a man, he will not ride in a car with a female by themselves alone, ever. That's kind of his boundary set up with his wife because they never want to have the appearance of impropriety. The challenge is in a really personal business like this, where you're sitting next to your RDA or your assistant all day long, you know, and you're sharing things with them, and you want to have that camaraderie. It's one of the biggest challenges, I think, with people learning leadership skills is this is us. We can have a cordial conversation. We can be nice. Yes, I do want to know that things are going okay in your marriage and with your kids. And yeah, I'll treat your kids. I have a chiropractic doctor who says, you know, you should never have a day off because if any of your kids are sick, bring them in. I'll take care of them. You know, same with them. Like, there is that piece of it. And then there's the, hey, it's 5 o'clock. Now it's my life and your life. We have to be separate. We have to have the ability and the freedom of peace of mind to be able to say we have two different lives here because of the exact same thing you said. You can't be getting drunk with them and getting mani-pedis one day, at night, and then having to discipline them the next day because you won't be taken seriously.
And I have seen this in my 28 years where a doctor starts to have an affair with an employee.
Yes.
And she's up there entering the check, so she starts thinking, well, I got a sweet deal here because I'm going to start embezzling.
Yes.
Because if he does catch me, I can say, well, you know, you've lost a little bit of money with me, but if I tell your wife, you're going to lose 10 times more money in a divorce. So what this dentist thinks is in secret, now he's in a blackmail hostage situation. And I've seen it with drugs too, where you know, she's ordering him Vicodin and Percodan, and they're doing drugs together, they're having sex together, and just their whole world explodes.
I have a client who years ago at a team retreat went, and they were all drinking a little bit and had a little too bit much, and they were all dancing on the dance floor. And he was dancing a little inappropriate with her, with somebody on the team, and his wife was even there. Cut to 2 years later, he ends up having to let her go, and she sues him for sexual harassment and ended up paying a lot of money because everyone else on the team saw that he was dancing. They didn't have an affair. There's nothing that went on beyond that, but they saw the inappropriate dancing on the dance floor with him. So, look, you're a professional. You're also human, I get that, but you have to be willing to set up your own personal expectations. I will do, I won't do. This is what we do this in our families, right? In my own family, we have a list of rules of what our kids can and cannot do and stuff, and how they should behave. And we say, are you a Watt kid? Like, a Watt kid doesn't do that. So my daughter right now is down in Brazil on a student exchange for a year. And she's dealing with a lot of kids around her age, 15, 16 years old, that are getting drunk on almost a nightly basis because it's their summer down there. And she's just like, no matter how much people ask her to and stuff, I'm really proud because she's obviously susceptible as a 15-year-old. But she'll be like, Dad, I'm getting asked this all the time. Parents are saying, hey, it's no problem. Have a drink. It's fine. It's a different culture than America. But she's a Watt kid. And that's not what Watt kids do. As a doctor, you got to decide, who are you? What do you stand for? If you want to be true to yourself, if you don't want to drain yourself like we were talking about earlier, and that's how a lot of people try to fill themselves, right? Is they just forget everything and go party or whatever. But with doctors, you got to be able to say, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. I am a doctor. I am somebody who cares about my patient, my team members. I'm someone who wants them to know that I want the best for them. I actually even believe you have to understand you are an example to them. Your marriage, the reason why you should have a strong marriage with your spouse is because you are an example to 5, 10, 20, 30 other people, those other women that work for you. You should want them to see you as an example, but that also goes on the other end. You got to be the example of, and this is where that border is. This is where that line deviates between our friendliness and our professionalism.
I liked it when you were talking about things your culture, things you believe in. We believe in only having good days and great days, radical transparency. Do you have any other things, any one-liners like that, or any other?
Yes. So what I do is I actually make we do a whole little exercise with every single one of my clients. It's always different with all of them because we want them to create it together. But we have like deliver a wow experience. I have one of the books that I help write with one of my doctors right in front of me here. And it's like, their core values are we deliver a wow experience. We create open and honest communication. We delight our customers. We believe in we are engaged in meaningful ways. We focus on team wins and individual improvement. We take action and be accountable. We strive for excellence and celebrate achievement. Bring the joy. I like that one. And be supportive, appreciative, and loyal. So when we look at core values, I call it the culture equation, right? When I talk about culture, I actually write this in my book where I say, most people talk about a culture. Tony Hsieh from Zappos is really popular right now in the business world talking about culture. And I think it's kind of a buzzword. But the biggest problem is nobody really defines how do you create a culture. And so I studied a lot of different companies and came up with the 3-step process to create your own culture. And it is, you have to know your vision, exactly what it is. What do you want for the company, for the world, whatever, on a tangible level. And then the expectations, which is the roadmap to get to the vision. And then once you have those two, you can be supportive of the people around you, which support is the last one. But, these are, I'm not kidding when I say hiring and firing list. I have my doctors now, once they create their core values and stuff, there is not a single job interview that goes by that they don't pull out the list of the core values and say, hey, can you adhere to every single one of these? If not, you're not a good fit for us. And then I also have them do that in the employee reviews. So all of their employee reviews are the same way. They don't have to go through, well, Sally said this, and remember the one time when you did that to Joan? And they don't have to do that. They just pull out the core values, turn them to them, and say, tell me how you're doing on these. You know what? Here's one that I think we might want to work on a little bit harder. It's a list. It's pretty simple, but yeah, those are the core values. I know that
I use mine during the employee evaluations that you're talking about every quarter.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And can I read my 12?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Here's my, there's 10 commandments. I got 12 core values. Create a fun, positive, and professional environment. Be passionate, enthusiastic, and determined to make a difference. Be humble. Embrace and drive innovation. Follow the golden rule. Treat others like you would want to be treated. Mistakes will be made. Be accepting and or accountable and move forward. Never stop learning. Be honest and respectful. Integrity is everything. Balance life and work and be fully present in both. Strive to make everyone feel safe, valued, and important. Be remarkable, helpful. And last, create opportunities to make our customers feel special. And when I do my when I go up there and sometimes I want to talk to someone about something that happened or whatever, I'll go through there and give them a letter grade for each one of them. And I'll say, okay, so you made her cry. Is that making her feel safe? You know what you were doing? You were being a bully because since she was holding the company policy, you had to beat your chest, and then she cried, and it's an F. It's totally unacceptable. Hey, I want a couple of things. What if one of my homies is listening to this and wants to reach out for you? How do they contact you?
You can reach me through my website is dinowatt.com. It's DINOWATT.com. If you're coming to the AAO in May, I'm speaking there. I'm doing a whole thing on body language.
Scottsdale?
What's that? In Orlando, the AAO in Orlando, in May 1st.
Okay.
May 1st, yeah. I'm doing a whole session on body language and the power of it. I'm actually going to bring up a couple of doctors, and so if you're there, you can actually volunteer. I'm going to bring up a couple of doctors and have you stand on stage, and I'm going to be able to point out which ones are a little more emasculated than the other ones and show them what they can do to change that in their body language. But DinoWatt.com. You can reach me at dino@dinowatt.com. We are always up on Facebook for the practicerx.com is my Facebook group. And I actually even have a private study group that I reach out to practice owners of all type, like dentists, orthodontists, chiropractors, because I truly believe that no industry changes from within the industry. So they always have to look outside the industry. My greatest example is Apple, right? They changed the music industry completely, and they're a computer company. So what I decided is I put together a study group kind of on Facebook where I invite certain doctors who I think can, add value to other doctors by saying, and we just talk about good stuff like, hey, what's the marketing plan that you found is good? What have you found out about, I don't know, postcards? Has postcards been a good thing for you? Or what about online marketing or whatever? And we talk about issues like this, like, all right, I have a challenge with an employee. I love them. They've been with me for 20 years, but I just don't know what I should do, whatever. So I do a Facebook group called Best Practices. And that's a fun little group. But yeah, those are pretty much the ways. They can also hit my book on Amazon called The Practice RX.
The Practice RX. And another thing is I've been lecturing at dental conventions since 1990, and the number one complaint at all dental conventions is there wasn't any courses for my staff. Mm-hmm. And, they're on root canals, fillings, crowns. And when we've put up 350 one-hour courses on Dental Town, they've been viewed over 500,000 times, but a lot of people will put up like a one-hour course on endo and then get booked like 76 speaking engagements because people are looking for speakers on these one-hour slots. It's kind of like a debut. So I think you'd be excellent at a meeting because your message applies to the dentist, the spouse, the receptionist, anybody who's a human. I think you should put an hour course online on Dental Town because what it really is not only will it help a lot of people, but a lot of there's 276 meeting planners in the United States as far as with the American Dental Association triage, and I think you'd get a lot of speaking gigs from it. I think you'd help a lot of people.
I'd love to. I'd love to do that for you. I think that would be awesome. I tell you, every time I speak on this subject, I've been in study groups where it's literally I'm just talking about marriage, but it's the husbands and wives together, right? And I have wives come up to me in tears and be like, why is my husband's been in practice for 20 years and nobody ever talks about this. Our marriage is strained. It's frustrated. We almost divorced, or this is his second marriage. Like, how come nobody's talking about this? And I've searched. I'm the only person in the world who does what I do when it comes to balancing the home life and your business life with true actual systems and principles that you can actually use within it. So I would love to do that. I think I'd be honored.
Yeah, I would love to. By the way, so are you Scottish and related to James Watt, who invented the steam engine?
That's funny. I don't know about James Watt, but everybody asks me if I'm Italian because of Dino, and I'm actually Scottish. I am. I'm Scottish Greek. Yeah.
Scottish Greek, huh?
I know. My dad always says just a bunch of angry drunks.
You spray Windex on everything.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Dino, I think you're an amazing man, and
thanks.
And homies, look, you're up there in Utah where the god of dentistry lives, Gordon Christian, and they'll go listen to this guy speak 8 hours a year on 8 hours every year on the wear rates of fillings, the adhesive, and I tell them, you'll listen to Gordon for 8 hours talking about the wear rates of 50 different materials when your fillings don't wear down. You'll listen to him talk for 4 hours on bonding strings when your fillings don't fall out. But you know what? You got to pay attention to yourself and keep yourself mentally, physically healthy, and you need to have healthy relationships with your wife, your kids, and your staff, so that combined you'll have healthy relationships with your patients and be monetary successful, pay your bills, have some savings, live happily ever after. Dino, I'm so honored that you spent an hour with me today.
My pleasure, man. Jeez, I'm touched.
And thank you so much for what you do. And like I say, I hope you put an online course on Dental Town because I think the profession needs a lot more of the people stuff and a hell of a lot less on the technical stuff, bonding agents, wear strings, bone grafting. I mean, they got way too much of that information. They got too much math and physics, not enough empathy, sympathy, and how do you talk to your dental assistant. So thank you for spending an hour with me today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for everybody for listening. And Dr. Farran, I love following you. As a non-dentist, let me just say that I totally love your videos. I love your messages out there. It's refreshing, honestly. It is really refreshing to hear.
Thanks, buddy. Okay. Have a great day.
All right. Bye-bye.